Hi, I'm Jeanette Keynes. I'm the author of Soldering Demystified from Jewelry Arts Inc. in New York City, and I'm here to share a few tips and tricks that are going to help you in your soldering. A really common question that students have when they're soldering is how much solder to use. Now, you're going to get better and better at that the longer that you do it, but I'm going to give you some tips that's going to help you hone in a lot more quickly on how much you need. One of the things that I like to do is I like to use sheet solder. I can cut really precise small amounts. I often, when I get my sheet solder, I'll even run it through a mill or whack it with a planishing hammer a little bit just to even make it a little thinner. You may not like to work on tiny, tiny little things like I do, but I like to just have the most versatility in my solder as possible. I have here a few different sizes that I might choose. I've got some sterling silver links. These are about 14 gauge. I'm working on my solderite board. That's really my favorite soldering surface. It stays flat for a really long time and it reflects an enormous amount of heat, more than any of the other ones I've tried. So this is really my favorite for things like this. So I'm going to just show you two examples. This is about a 2x2 square, 2 millimeter by 2 millimeter. I'm going to dip it in a little bit of flux, position it under my seam, just like that, and I'll put a little bit of flux on the seam to make sure I've got enough for it to flow. Now, this is what my seams usually look like. A very small amount of solder. I'm visualizing just enough to overfill it a tiny bit. A lot of times, students are going to do something more like this, where you're going to use a large square. This is probably 4 millimeters by 4 millimeters approximately. And when you set up your ring or your jump ring or whatever it is you're doing, it looks more like this. You know, you've got a really large square sticking out quite a bit. So I'm going to solder both of these and then we'll take a look at them and you can see how you can determine what's the right amount. So I'll solder my small one first. I'm just going to hold my flame level right over the seam. And it's flowed. Now I'm going to melt my link with the larger amount of solder. Now take a look at those two seams. Where I used my 4x4 or 4x5 piece, I've got a big icky lump. And I'm going to have to file that away and sand it quite a bit. And to be honest with you, it's never really going to look all that nice. Now look at the piece here where I used just a small little 2x2. You can barely see the solder sticking out above. You've got just that little bit of excess, and I'm going to be able to sand that off really quickly and easily. So one of the main things that you can do for getting better and better at this is just start cutting smaller and smaller pieces of solder. Let's say you used a piece of solder a tiny bit too small, you could always add another small piece. But once you have a large piece, you're just getting yourself into a whole lot of cleanup, which is a big drag. So I suggest going smaller and smaller until you're not filling up your seam. And very quickly, you're going to start to develop that sense of how much you need.